presentation. Oh, sorry. Our next session is a presentation on building resilience through spend monitoring. Please feel free to submit questions as we go through the chat function, though we will be leaving dedicated time for Q&A at the end of the session. On that, it's my pleasure to welcome our speaker, Shouvik Banerjee. He's the product owner for Ignio Cognitive Procurement with Digitate. Shouvik, thank you very much for taking the time to join us for this presentation today. With that, I pass the virtual floor to you.
Thanks, Ben. And it's a pleasure to be with all of you. I think it has been a very interesting event for the past 1.5 days or so. So let me talk about a topic that I think we've touched upon multiple times over the course of the last 1.5 days, which is about building resilience, right? And it's a big thing. Building resilience has many facets to it, is how I would see. One of the things that organizations would want to do, we believe, over the next couple of years, is to embark on some waves of digitalization which would allow them to build resilience even better, right? And while there are several levers that you can pull to build resilience, we believe one such lever could be building in a way to actually do spend monitoring, right? So let's get inside what exactly does spend monitoring mean, right? So if you look at resilience itself, a lot of the capability around resilience revolves around what kind of intelligence do you have at your disposal, and what is the quality of that intelligence, how timely is that intelligence, and what can you do with it, right? And if you look at the last 1.5 years, we've just come out of the pandemic, or we're just coming out of it. And if you look at intelligence along two dimensions, one is the what I call as the recency of intelligence, as in how current is your intel. And the other is the granularity of the intelligence, right? Is it very coarse, or is it really fine? I think the attempt is very clear that is going to be to get live intelligence and as fine as you can get it, right? And if you think about the procurement industry in general, and if you've seen the role that intelligence has played by and large, one would say that the space is called as spend analytics, which is where you look at the transactions that somebody executes within an organization over a period of time. You take that out of the systems which are e-procurement or ERP systems, and you slice and dice that, try to figure out ways to optimize spend, right? So if I had to summarize it, that's possibly analyzing, deducing, reporting, right? That's essentially been the style of trying to figure out what can you do to sort of optimize better. I believe the future would require organizations to go beyond the realm of spend analytics and step into the realm of what we call as spend monitoring. Spend monitoring is a far more continuous activity as opposed to spend analytics, which could be periodic, right? When I say continuous monitoring, I mean continuously scanning not just what is happening inside an organization, but also looking at what's happening outside the organization, right? So you have to keep your eye on both sides of the fence. And you have to detect either opportunities or problems that may arise. And you have to have an ability to intercept any decision or any action that is being taken on the ground, right? And therein lies possibly a large scope of what one could do with technology, and what somebody could do with possibly digitalization, right? But the beauty of, I think, this movement is while spend analytics gives you some level of intelligence, the trick is, can you take that intelligence that you've derived from the past and can you feed it forward and sort of keep that in mind or keep that in context when you are doing continuous monitoring, right? So I think that is very key. You cannot do monitoring just by yourself. And so that is essentially what our product actually does. So we have a product out there which is called as Ignio Cognitive Procurement. It is an AI-based spend monitoring solution specifically for procure to pay at this stage. What it does is it analyzes purchase transactions, both historical as well as live transactions. The intent is to determine if there are any kind of problems or opportunities that could be intercepted in time, right? And that's essentially what the focus of the software is, right? So the question, I guess the first question that would come in anyone's mind is, where would you position such a solution in the larger scheme of things? If you go inside any organization, most likely there is an e-procurement or an e-sourcing or an ERP system already in place. So where do you put in a spend monitoring solution, right? So here is essentially a thought. So if you think about all the systems that make up an e-procurement or an ERP system, let's call them as spend management systems. And there are several out there like an SAP Ariba or a Coupa or an Oracle. Think of them as, in some sense, a first line of defense against any kind of risk, right? So what these systems do is they obviously serve as systems of record. They capture the purchase transactions themselves, and they do a bunch of validations at the point of executing the transactions, right? And they also provide you an ability to analyze these transactions once in a while in an offline mode. And while that is great, and a first line of defense is great to ensure that you're managing risk properly, I think it is safe to assume in today's world that there are still going to be cases that are going to go through, that are going to slip through the cracks, right? These might be opportunities that you miss. These might be anomalies that you fail to spot. And the problem is if they are left undetected and not corrected, they would eventually cause some damage. And by the time you would realize that the damage has been done, it would be irreversible. Right? And so our recommendation is that if you think of a spend monitoring system, it can possibly act as a second line of defense, right? Whose sole purpose in life would be to monitor and intercept, right? So while it would not fundamentally capture any of the transactions or enable any of the purchase transactions to go through, it would work in conjunction with the spend management systems, and it would act as an independent validation and verification sort of layer, right? And it would provide that crucial second line of defense. And this combination of having a first line of defense and a second line of defense could be very useful to enterprises in the future. So for management, it in some sense provides a two-step verification for every single spend decision and action that you take across systems. And across systems is important because companies might have different ERP systems in play in different regions. There might be different systems in play to handle different parts of the transaction. It's important that you have a second line of defense, which is kind of looking across, ensuring that nothing slips through the cracks, right? And so you handle risk in a much better way, and that's value for management. There is also a value in it for auditors who come by once in a while asking the hard questions, right? And the way they work today is they will sample a few of the transactions and they will apply some rule-based checks, and they would essentially find out problems and they would extrapolate and say, this is what seems to be wrong. In this world where you have a second line of defense, which is completely digitalized, which is working 24/7 and pretty much screening every single transaction that is coming through, you no longer have to rely on any kind of sample-based audits. In some sense, you have continuous auditing in some sense, right? Working around the clock. And so that is a far better way of sort of managing risk and ensuring that if you do find something, you fix the controls that you have in this layer and they ensure that the problems don't repeat themselves again, right? So that's essentially where we see a spend monitoring system sort of go in and sit, right? So the question is, how do you do this, right? And what would or how would a spend monitoring system essentially work? So the way we have architected this product is, again, given the kind of technology that is available at your disposal today, you can use several AI/ML techniques to essentially learn from your historical experiences. You can crunch the data that can be pulled out from markets, and you can, learn from your past behavior. You can learn what's happening in the market, and sort of use that to train the system as to what is normal, what is abnormal, what should possibly be allowed to pass through, what should possibly be challenged, right? And so that's the first part of it. You detect issues, you analyze past transactions along with the market, and you're continuously exploring any kind of changing or evolving procurement behavior, and you learn what is worth monitoring. And using that knowledge, the software provides an ability to define and configure certain set of controls, using which you can then monitor live transactions, right? And you can screen every single live transaction and you can challenge it through these controls. And if you find something is wrong, you can flag a transaction, you can say what is wrong with that transaction, you can make a recommendation on what to do to fix any issue that you have identified. And what this does is, because you're doing this live, you actually get that crucial sort of window of opportunity to intercept, right, and ensure that any damage does not get done, or it can be prevented before before it causes any irreversible sort of damage. So if you take a step back and think about it, a spend monitoring system, in some sense, allows you to keep your eye on several things simultaneously, right? But more importantly, as procurement evolves in its role of not just being a central organization which is procuring on behalf of every single business unit, but also possibly sometimes enabling other business units to procure and ensuring that they lend that guidance. This allows you to empower people at the edge who can sort of go out there and do the procurement, while it allows you to intelligently monitor their actions. So if you see that something is not going through properly, you can sort of intercept, provide the right kind of guidance, and ensure that damage doesn't happen. So in some sense, a spend monitoring system also allows you to empower more people at the edge to take more decisions without increasing the risk of any kind of fraud or abuse or for that matter, waste, right? So that's essentially what the software is about. I just need a couple of minutes to give you a quick peek into how the software looks like. I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but being conscious of the time, what you're seeing here is essentially a landing page of our software. And like I mentioned, since this is a spend monitoring software, the key part of the software is this side, which we call the command center. This is where we are monitoring live purchase requests, live purchase orders, live invoices through several controls, which I'll show in a little bit. And then we have an exploration center where we have the ability to analyze different kinds of open or closed transactions through different lenses to figure out are there ways in which you can possibly optimize, right? So we have a price variance analysis, for example, which is looking at items that you seem to be buying from different vendors at different price points. Can you identify those items? Can you identify a best price point or an optimal price point at which you should buy? And then can you monitor that item on an ongoing basis using the command center, right? So that's what something like this allows you to do. And we have several such modules. We have a supplier analysis module, which is looking at different aspects of a supplier's performance and sort of gauging their reliability in terms of how reliable are they. Should you increase your business with them? Should you decrease your business with them? Should you bring in some more suppliers, right? So those kinds of things, right? So there are several ways in which we monitor past transactions. And then we use that learning to essentially look at the command center. So let me just give you a quick peek into when we say a command center, what that command center looks like. So like I said, the command center is something that we have designed from a perspective of controls. And what is a control? A control is nothing but a very specific business check that you might want to subject a particular transaction to. So in some sense, you are screening a transaction from multiple perspectives to see if there's anything wrong with that transaction and should it be allowed to go through or should it be challenged, right? So as you can see here, we have several kinds of controls. We have a spotlight section where you can decide the most important control that you want to keep your eye on. You have a quick catch section, which has several other controls that you can pick and choose and arrange them in the way that you want and sort of keep your eye on that. And then we have a couple of other sections on the pages, but let me sort of come into a couple of controls as an example to sort of substantiate what I just said a little while ago, right? So if you remember, I had said that the trick is to learn from the past and ensure that that learning is being put to use when you're actually monitoring, right? So for example, we have a control here which is flagging purchase orders which are possibly going through with suppliers who are not very reliable, right? So how do we capture the reliability of a supplier? So we have a fairly sophisticated algorithm which looks at several aspects of a supplier's performance over the last 12 months, right? So it looks at what has been the price competitiveness of that supplier. with respect to their peers? What has been their track record on timeliness? How often have they been able to deliver on time? What has been their track record with respect to popularity? Are they a really popular supplier inside your organization or not? And then we blend this kind of intelligence with intelligence that is coming from the market. So what is the financial health of that supplier? What has been their track record on sustainability? Are they making any kind of negative news, or are they in the news for all the positive reasons? So we bring all of that from several sources, and we blend all of that, and we generate what we call as a supplier reliability score, which is a score on a scale of 1 to 10, very similar to a score that you get for a hotel on a booking.com, right? And once you have that kind of an objective evaluation of a supplier, it allows you to sort of then look at every single transaction and sort of objectively evaluate, are you really doing it with the best supplier possible? And when we give you a control like this, we give you the ability to sort of drill down. You can go in, you can look at the POs that have been flagged, going through with less reliable suppliers. You can drill all the way down, look at all the transactions that have been flagged, and then you can go inside a particular transaction, and you can see a very specific insight that has been generated, which says that this particular supplier has a low reliability score. From a percentile perspective, they're at the lower end, and there's a recommendation to sort of consider somebody as an alternate. And if you want to challenge this, you can sort of send a notification from the software itself to any stakeholder immediately, including the insights that we have generated here, so that that person can take some kind of a timely action, which is where the interception concept comes in. And so this file that I just showed you, the ability to sort of flag a transaction because of a particular problem, and then the ability to sort of go down to a lowest level of detail and sort of catch problems before they turn into cause any kind of damage, is essentially what our software essentially does. Several other several other kind of controls that we have, transactions going through with pricey suppliers, cases with price variance. So these are items that seem to be bought, or people are trying to buy these items at a price point which seems to be suboptimal, and so we are flagging them. We also use patterns. So we mine patterns from past data to sort of look at if you have run into issues like delays in the past, under what conditions have you run into delays. So we use AI algorithms to mine patterns, and then we allow you as users to monitor those patterns on a selective basis. And so if you see that a new transaction is coming through which sort of matches the pattern that you've put on the software, then it starts to flag those particular cases as likely cases of delays, right? And so you have many such controls. They could be simple rule-based controls, which you can configure, or pattern-based or model-based controls. But the whole idea is to give the power back to you as a business user to ensure that you are able to catch problems before they cause any kind of damage. So that's essentially what the software does. And just so we understand from a configurability perspective, this is a very, very configurable software. You can sort of design your own dashboards. You can pick your own controls from a catalog that we give you. You can configure the controls any which way that you want. You can screen only certain types of transactions and not all types of transactions. So all of that freedom sort of rests with you. So that's in a nutshell what this thing is about. And so on a closing note, like I said, our intent is to try and see if we can encourage customers to step into the realm of spend monitoring and think beyond just spend analytics, because we believe that spend monitoring possibly could be a wave of digitalization that is worth undertaking in many organizations today. So I'll pause here. Ben, back to you.
Fantastic, Shouvik. It brings us to the end of the session. We're perfectly on time to finish. Shouvik, what I would suggest is if you can post, if you're happy to, post your email address in the chat function for everyone to see. And that anyone who has any questions, fantastic. Anyone that has any questions would like to reach out to Shouvik directly to please do so.
Yes.